Hi, my lady friend. Got a
Hi,
minute? Oh,
sorry.
you are my lady friend. Yes, you are my lady friend. And I'm also speaking to our audience. So thank you so much for that. But do y'all have a minute? Because we have this wonderful spotlight that we're going to be shining on this beautiful lady today. So, welcome to Women's Spotlight, Her Light, Her Story, a space where we celebrate women leaders, entrepreneurs, and creatives who are showing up with courage, purpose, and authenticity. I'm your host, Tiffany, and in each episode, we shine light on her story, the real journey behind the titles, the challenges, and the victories. So today, I'm excited to introduce you to Caitlin Whitmoyer. I say that right.
Yes.
And she is the human potential strategist at Beacon and co-owner and co-founder of Thread Education. And in our conversation, we're going to learn about Caitlin's story and how she shines light on her life's purpose. So grab your coffee or your hot cocoa, settle in, and let's step into the spotlight together with Caitlin Whitmoyer. So we're so glad to have you here with us today, Caitlin. And how are you doing?
Thank you so much. I'm doing really well and I'm excited to be here.
Okay, well, thank you so much. So we want to ask first of all, for you to tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Absolutely. Yes. So I'm Caitlin. I am a mom. I am a multi-preneur. I am a projector in the human design world. Um, I am a wife to a wonderful husband who is transitioning into a career in aviation after a decade and a half long career in sales.
Oh, wow.
Yes, yes. I'm a daughter, I'm a sister, I'm a friend to many. But most importantly, I'm human, just like all of you. So excited to dive into today's topic and talk about human potential, which is what I do.
Okay, great. So who is Caitlin? You told us there were a lot of titles and rep responsibilities that you have, which of course as women we do have a lot, we carry a lot. So who are you beyond those titles and responsibilities?
Yeah. I love this question. And this is actually what influenced my rebrand, right? Because when I first became an entrepreneur, I felt like I had to define myself in one way. I felt like I had to say, as a career in education that I had behind me, I was a teacher or a principal or a mentor. And I really boxed myself in to what niche in entrepreneurship that I was going to take, right? And I love this question of like, who are you behind the titles? Because this is exactly what I help my clients figure out for themselves. And when we peel all of that back, and for me, when I peel all of that back, at the end of the day, like who I am, I think is what I'm here to do and what my passions are. And, the not just the gift I can be to others, but also like my own soul and what does it need here while I'm on earth in this journey in this lifetime. And right now, in this season, what that looks like is really leaning into my feminine side and being a mom and wanting to nurture my family and to grow my family, which, it's not a place I could have imagined what it looks like. It's different than you expect, but it's certainly a journey that I'm enjoying. And so right now in this season, that's how I would describe myself.
I'm so glad that you said that about growing as well, because sometimes we do think that we need to be in the box. I'm an fellow educator as well, retired, and I feel exactly what you stated. I was like, I had to do this one thing because that's kind of what we do when we're in education, even though we have a realm of things that we know about. I go back to the classroom management, instructional strategies, RTI. We have to know a whole lot. And so then I started feeling like, as an entrepreneur, sometimes I was like, well, am I doing too much? But as an educator, we do a lot, but we do tend to box ourselves in. And I'm so glad you said that because we have to remember that we're growing as individuals. And I'm so glad to hear that in this season, you're talking about growing your family, growing yourself, you're growing your brand. So that is so important. And I thank you for sharing that part with us. So now we want to talk a little bit more about your purpose. So we know that every woman leads in her own way. So what is the heartbeat behind how you show up as a leader, whether that's in your home, at work, in your community, or within your one of those businesses that you were talking about?
Absolutely. I think you can answer this through sharing your values and what values guide you, but also like how those values play out. So I will say a core value for me is authenticity. And the true definition of that, right? It's a
Mhm.
word that's thrown around a lot. We want authentic alignment, like this lofty idea that we can find the exact thing that brings us into those spaces of authenticity and alignment. And what it looks like for me to lead that way is to be unafraid to make mistakes, to be vulnerable, to say what's on my mind and not be afraid of what is going to be perceived by my true thoughts, my honest truth. To radically embrace all parts of me with compassion and to do the same for the people that I serve. So I think the definition of that for me has definitely evolved over time. I think I used to think authenticity was like doing what you feel you're best at. And yes, that's certainly part of it. And, I think in education, it's easy for us to fall into that trap of like feeling authentic in your work and feeling like you're doing a good job or you are good enough. And that feels true and authentic. But my definition has certainly shifted more to the human side of us, which is we're not perfect. We're never going to be perfect, but we are evolving. And if we can evolve with awareness, and that's
Mhm.
where the word beacon comes into play with my brand, it's about being a conscious human. If you break apart that word and add on conscious,
Mhm.
that's kind of my tagline. So that's what it's about for me.
Well, I love that, and education gives you such a great foundation for what you're aspiring to do. So again, hats off to you, and thank you for sharing that. So we now want to talk a little bit about the self-care aspect because again, we show up to do work, and sometimes we don't always necessarily take care of ourselves, and we know that we can't do our very best if we're not taking care of ourselves. So. Tell me something that, because I'm hearing that you're within health and wellness as well. So tell me a little bit about how you deal with health and wellness as it relates to self-care for yourself.
Yeah. Well, I'm finding in this season, it's actually not easy for me to do the self-care things that I know I should be doing. But in that same breath, I also know it's not beneficial for me to move to judgment of not being able to do those things, right? Because honestly, I have a lot on my plate. I am the main provider for our family. I have a 2-year-old. I have, a dog. I have a house to keep up with, and there's, so many things, right? But for me, self-care is about taking a sacred pause. And by sacred pause, I mean it's carved out time that you schedule for yourself or that you're aware of that you need and you commit to honoring the need. So what this actually looks like day to day for me is, on a busy day like today where I have back-to-back calls and commitments that I have to be present for, it's having a hard stop. And when I have that hard stop, before I go into the next thing that I'm doing, I'm taking 10, 15 minutes for myself to move if I need to move, to go sit outside and get some fresh air if I need to get fresh air, to eat something that's nourishing.
Mhm.
It looks so different day to day. I think it's very hard to quantify self-care in one way for us as humans because self-care for me is going to look very different than it looks for you. And
Mhm.
season to season, it's also going to change. So I think right now, the self-care that I'm getting back to is my yoga practice. So I teach yoga and I'm a student always. And getting back into the studio 1 to 2 times a week for a class has been huge. Um, Also, making sure I am eating enough. Like, that's such an easy thing for us moms to forget to do throughout the day or anybody that's busy, right? Like, we skip breakfast, we eat lunch at 2 p.m. So, making
Yeah.
sure I'm giving my body what it needs and then sleep. That's the other big one for me right now.
Hmm. Well, thank you for sharing that. And so, hearing that you have a 2-year-old, you have a lot of other things that are going on in your life that I'm sure you're doing a wonderful job with. But how do you find, or what do you do when you feel like you need to reset yourself, like when you're running on empty? Because I know that that can happen from time to time.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I will say that's where I lean heavily on my community. So whether that looks like dialing a friend and saying, "Hey, I just need to talk," or getting some acupuncture, or just giving myself, like, even though my weeks are full and I technically shouldn't be taking a day off, it's giving myself, I am burned out. I need to take Thursday off and just hard reset my life, right? So
Mhm.
I think it's a practice of being internally committed to recognizing that that's what you need and to following through with that, even when it feels uncomfortable or impossible to do. Because I found that when I ignore it and when I shove that down and suppress the need, it manifests into something else. And I actually had a very personal relationship with burnout in this way years ago when I was
Mhm.
still in the education space. And I
Mhm.
suppressed so much for so long that I ended up with a chronic disease that I still deal with today.
Mhm.
So I always like to remind myself that when I'm tempted to shove it down and suppress it, that doesn't lead anywhere good. And it's much harder to reverse a chronic state of stress or disease than it is to try to mitigate those symptoms as they show up.
Yes, and actually, your answer to what you just mentioned may even be a segue into the question we're about to go into, and if you want to go more into it, you can. But I was about to ask you, can you share a time when you had to rise back from a challenge, and then what anchored you in that season?
Yeah, absolutely.
Hmm.
So like I mentioned, was working, it was towards the end of my career in education
Hmm.
when that was the box that I was in. And I was doing a job that first of all, when I applied for this job, I thought I'm never going to get hired, but like this would be amazing if I got this job, right? It's an amazing opportunity, the impact I'd be able to have. I'd be working with district and state and being like the middle person who would help create this need this or address this need
Hmm.
for this group, this community of students that are at risk. And I was like so pumped about it. And if you know anything about burnout, stage one of burnout always starts with being driven by an ideal. We get so excited about our work or so driven to be perfect at what we're doing that we forget that we're humans and that perfect doesn't exist. And we can't accomplish everything that is either expected of us by somebody else when it goes beyond our means of what's within our capacity to achieve in a day, right?
Hmm.
But I
Hmm.
know that a lot of places, workplaces, not just in education, do demand a lot of people. And so it's very easy for us to get sucked into being driven by an ideal. And so that happened for me. And that gradually morphed into losing my sense of self and being cynical and clueless as to why. If you read Dr. Joan Borysenko's book Fried, she talks about these stages of burnout, and I found myself all the way at the end, which was mental and physical collapse. So
Hmm.
a year and change into this job that I thought I was going to live my career out in, I
Hmm.
ended up having to quit because of the health condition that I developed with the burnout that I experienced. And what I learned about burnout was it's not the circumstance that causes the burnout, it's your response to the circumstance. And that's
Hmm.
really important. And that lesson I
Hmm.
carry with me today into when I experience burnout today, because once you experience it once, it doesn't mean you're safe from it and you'll never experience it again. In fact, I think you're even more susceptible to it because that's just who we are as people, right? If we're
Hmm.
high achieving people, then we're probably more susceptible to things like
Right, right.
so. I landed in this place of mental and physical collapse. It coincided with the time that my husband and I were really trying to start a family, and I found myself unable to conceive. And of course, the chronic disease was playing a role into that,
Hmm.
but it was also my own belief about what I thought was possible with healing. Because when you get to that place of mental and physical collapse and you're labeled with a disease, and then you're told you can't have kids, you feel pretty hopeless at first. And you feel like, okay, so now what? What's next for me? How do I even begin to reverse what I've done?
Hmm.
And my healing journey looked like doing things that I don't think a lot of people have the courage to do, which was like number one, quit that job. Most people I know would not quit their job. They would just
Keep
plow
going.
right through, you
Hmm.
know? And I made the choice. I said, I don't care if I have to go wait tables, which is exactly what I did. I can't be here. And
Hmm.
so I walked away from a very well-paying job and took a year-long, I called it a sabbatical. I was still working. I was waiting tables. I did my yoga teacher training. I read so many books. I was just so curious about healing and
Hmm.
my own brain and my own potential and what it would take for me to move back into the space of optimal health, which was very different than my previous definition. I think my previous definition was, I don't know, like be just okay, like just
Hmm.
survive, right?
Yeah.
But I've learned like optimal health is really what makes you feel best, and only you can define that. Blood work can't define that. Nobody else can tell you what optimal health is. You have to feel your best. And so, long story short, a year and a half later, after going through this cocoon and metamorphosis process of re-emerging into the world a different career person and somebody that had healed and reversed their state of chronic disease and was able to successfully conceive and have a healthy pregnancy,
Great.
learned that I learned a lot. Like the journey speaks for itself, right? So
Oh,
yeah, I think that's a good example of your answer,
well,
your question.
well, yeah, I was just going to say thank you so much for sharing that with us. I know that that's very personal, but I'm so glad that you felt comfortable to share your story. As you were talking, I was typing in some things because sometimes when I'm speaking or having a discussion, I like to just have some I ideals that we've talked about that I could refer back to. So that's what I was doing. And I loved how you stated what optimal health looks like for you when you feel your best. So I made sure I put that in there as well. So thank you for sharing it. I'm so glad that you found a way to heal yourself and to move beyond what was causing you the stress. To be able to move into some place now that you're helping others, you're helping yourself, but you're also helping others that may have gone through something similar, but they didn't have the person or someone to lead them through. So I believe there's a reason a lot of times we move from one area to another when God tells us, and it's because He has other work for us to do to help others. So I'm so glad that you shared that with me, and so glad that everything is working out better for you at this time in your life. So, if you had to give advice to a woman who whose light might be dimming a bit, what would be your advice to that woman?
Ugh, I think, first of all, to know that you are part of a much larger community than you could probably ever imagine of people who feel just as you do. And as awful as it feels, it's also a totally human thing to experience. And I
Mhm.
think one thing, somebody asked me earlier this week, what do you do when a client comes to you in pain? Physical, emotional, it doesn't matter. And I always say, well, if somebody comes to me in pain, I actually celebrate the fact that they're aware that they are in pain.
Mm,
So I would say to that person, it's so good you can know and express and articulate what you're feeling right now. Because as
mm,
I mentioned earlier, so many times I see high achieving people suppress that feeling and keep going and living their life as if everything is just fine and they've adjusted to feeling less than normal as they're okay. And
mhm,
so the fact that you can acknowledge that your light is dimming and that you need something is a really powerful place to be.
mhm. Thank you for that. And then, if you could tell your younger self one message, what would you want her to know?
That you do not need to put yourself into a box that anybody else has made. You can make your own box and you don't even need to be in a box.
That's great. Yes, thank you so much. And that's refreshing, like I told you earlier for myself, because that's something that I have struggled with. And I'm so glad that we've had the conversation to know that another fellow educator felt the same way, that we get boxed in, but we know that we don't have to be boxed in. And I'm so glad again that you shared that with us, or any other educators that may be listening to today's podcast. So I want to now have you share with our audience how people can connect with you.
Absolutely. Well, you can find me on LinkedIn. You can look up my full first and last name. That is probably the platform I'm most active on right
Okay.
now. But I'm
Uh-huh.
also going through this metamorphosis with my brand. And so you can also connect with me on Instagram at B period the period beacon. And you'll
Okay.
be seeing lots more things coming from that page around different offerings, different opportunities, lots of free community things that we'll be doing to help people who are on the same path of wanting to shift something in their life, but not knowing how to take that step. So,
Okay. Thank you for that. So we want to tell you, Caitlin, just thank you for taking some time out your busy schedule to join us today on the Women's Spotlight, Her Light, Her Story. And I hope today's conversation with Caitlin to our audience has inspired you all to keep shining your light and walking confidently in your own story. So if you love this episode, be sure to subscribe, share it with a friend, and join us next time as we continue to celebrate the incredible journeys of women like you. So until then, keep showing up, keep growing, and keep shining. And see you next time, my lady friend. And thank you again, Caitlin, for your time today.
yes, thank you.